My friends, every so often, a single moment on an ordinary day becomes a mirror that reflects the truth of who we are. One such moment unfolded high above the clouds, in the aisle of an airplane. A black CEO, a man who had built his life on hard work, discipline, and vision, stepped forward with his ticket in hand. A ticket that read first class. And yet, he was told, "This seat isn't for you." The air grew heavier than the cabin itself. Not because of the seat, not because of the flight, but because of the weight of assumption. The silent judgment that one person, because of their skin, their appearance, their identity, could not possibly belong in a place of excellence. But here's the truth: moments like these are not simply about injustice. They are also about resilience. Because instead of retreating, instead of responding with anger or despair, this CEO stood tall. His presence, his calm, his undeniable dignity became a lesson for every single soul on that plane. And when the truth of who he was came to light, the silence was no longer heavy with prejudice. It was heavy with awakening. This story is not about one man. It is about all of us. It is about a nurse who works 2 jobs to care for strangers as if they were her family. It is about the student who studies by candlelight, dreaming of one day being the first in her community to graduate. It is about the father who rises before the sun, not because life is easy, but because he knows his children deserve more. These are the stories of perseverance, of strength, of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And so, the lesson of that flight is clear: where others see barriers, we must see bridges. Where others place doubt, we must plant belief. Where others say you don't belong, we must stand up and declare everyone belongs when they've earned their place with sweat, sacrifice, and unshakable will. My friends, the seat in life you are given does not define you. The seat you fight for, the seat you build for yourself, the seat you create for others, that is what defines you. We must choose to rise above judgment, rise above limitation, rise above fear. We must look at one another not as competitors in a small cabin, but as fellow travelers on a vast journey. Because the truth is, no matter the color of our skin, the weight of our bank account, or the sound of our accent, we all share the same sky. And so tonight, I call on you, not just to hear this story, but to live it. To stand tall when others question your place. To create space for those who are told they don't belong. To remind this world that greatness has no color, no boundaries, no limits. Because our future will not be built by those who guard the first-class cabin of yesterday. It will be built by those who dare to believe that everyone, everywhere can rise to their highest seat. And so let us rise, together, with dignity, with courage, with hope. The seat is waiting, the future is calling, and the world is watching. There are moments in life that slip by unnoticed, moments that dissolve into the noise of our daily routines, gone before we even realize they arrived. And then there are other moments, rare, unshakable, defining, that carve themselves into our memory forever. These moments do not just belong to us as individuals, they belong to history, to culture, to the ongoing story of humanity. They are the moments when the weight of truth presses down, demanding to be acknowledged, demanding to be felt. Picture it clearly: a crowded airplane cabin, the hum of engines filling the background, the overhead bins snapping shut, passengers settling into their seats. It seems like nothing more than another routine flight. Just another ordinary day above the clouds. But then something happens. A man, a black CEO, steps forward, ticket in hand. His pass reads first class, yet when he approaches, he is stopped. He is told in quiet but firm words, "This seat isn't for you." It is in that instant that time seems to slow. Everyone nearby feels it. The passengers, the crew, even those who may have been lost in their phones or books suddenly sense the shift in the atmosphere. Because it is not just about a seat. It is about what that seat represents. It is about the layers of meaning, the silent story hidden behind a ticket. And in that single moment, something far greater than travel is taking place. This is the weight of a moment, a second in time, heavy enough to carry centuries of history, a second that drags with it the unspoken questions of belonging, identity, and dignity. A second that asks, do we see each other for who we truly are, or for who we assume each other to be? And what makes this moment so powerful is not the confrontation itself, but the fact that it reveals something we often forget. Life can change in the blink of an eye. In less than 60 seconds, a man went from a passenger holding a valid ticket to a man being questioned, doubted, and subtly denied his rightful place. In less than 60 seconds, strangers on that plane went from routine travelers to silent witnesses of injustice. And in less than 60 seconds, the truth about the fragile state of our unity was exposed for everyone to see. Moments like this matter because they remind us that progress is not just measured in laws passed or policies written. Progress is measured in the everyday decisions people make. Decisions about respect, about fairness, about whether or not we recognize the humanity standing in front of us. And sometimes those decisions are made in the quiet confines of an airplane, under the hum of fluorescent lights, with nothing more than a simple boarding pass. But here is where the suspense deepens, because what follows that moment is not written yet. It is unwritten because it depends on us. How we respond, how we interpret, how we carry forward the lesson it forces us to confront. The weight of a single moment is not in its passing, it is in its echo. It lingers long after the engines roar to life, long after the seatbelt signs turn off, long after the plane lands on solid ground. Think of history itself. Every movement, every revolution, every act of change began with a moment like this. A moment that seemed small, almost forgettable, yet carried with it the spark of transformation. Rosa Parks sitting down on a bus. A student standing in the doorway of a segregated school. A worker demanding to be treated with dignity. None of those people could have predicted that their moment, their stand, their quiet refusal to step back would echo across decades. And yet, it did. So when a black CEO is denied his seat in first class, it is not merely an inconvenience. It is not merely a misunderstanding. It is a moment heavy with all the weight of history, ready to demand whether we will turn away or whether we will pay attention. Because sometimes, the smallest scenes in the smallest corners of our lives hold the largest truths. And perhaps the most haunting part of all is this: none of us know when our own defining moment will arrive. None of us know when we will be the one standing in the aisle, when we will be the one holding the ticket, when we will be the one faced with the choice to stand tall or shrink back. None of us know which moment, ordinary at first glance, will suddenly carry the weight of a lifetime. There are moments in life that pass quietly, almost without notice. They slip into the stream of routine, lost in the business of our schedules, gone before we ever realize they arrived. But then, there are other moments, rare, undeniable, unforgettable, that grip us by the heart and refuse to let go. These are the moments that hold weight. They are heavier than the hours around them, heavier than the days they live inside. And their weight does not come from time, but from truth. Picture the setting, an airplane cabin alive with movement. Luggage sliding into overhead compartments, conversations rising and falling, the steady hum of engines preparing for ascent. Everything appears ordinary. Just another flight, just another journey in the skies. And then, something changes. A man steps forward, dressed with quiet confidence, his ticket in hand. His destination is not economy, not business, but first class. He has worked for it, earned it, paid for it. The ticket confirms his right. But before he can take his seat, he is stopped. A voice interrupts. "Sir, this seat isn't for you." In that instant, the cabin feels smaller. The air shifts. People glance up from their devices, the rhythm of boarding disrupted. It is not just about a seat. It is not about upholstery or legroom or glassware. It is about what that seat has always symbolized: privilege, access, belonging. And in that one sentence, spoken with calm authority, but rooted in assumption, all of that is questioned. This is the weight of a single moment. It is the instant when the world slows down and reveals its fault lines. A second in which one man's dignity is quietly placed on trial. And though it seems fleeting, it is not fleeting at all. It is a moment that stretches across centuries, carrying the echoes of stories too often repeated. It is not just about him. It is about everyone who has ever been told without words, "You do not belong here." The true weight of a moment like this is not measured in seconds. It is measured in what it exposes. It uncovers the tension between progress made and prejudice that lingers. It uncovers the uncomfortable truth that no matter how far one rises, there are still those who will look first at skin before they look at soul. And it uncovers the question that hangs heavy in the airs: how will we respond? For some, the instinct is anger, sharp and justified. For others, it is silence, a desire to avoid conflict. But for the man standing there, a CEO who has climbed every rung of the ladder, who has endured sacrifice invisible to most, his choice is something else. He does not raise his voice. He does not storm away. He stands tall. He allows the weight of the moment to press down without allowing it to crush him. And here lies the power, because strength is not always measured in volume. Sometimes it is measured in stillness, in the refusal to bend, in the quiet dignity of holding one's ground, and the cabin, once filled with chatter, feels the silence of that dignity. The passengers sense it. The crew senses it. They realize they are not watching a misunderstanding. They are watching a mirror, reflecting the world as it is, not as it should be. Think about this. History itself is a chain of such moments. Rosa Parks did not sit on that bus believing she was rewriting history. She sat because she was tired, because it was right, because she chose not to move. That single moment carried the weight of generations. A student standing in the doorway of a school, a worker demanding to be treated with fairness, a child refusing to be silent. All of them ordinary people caught in extraordinary seconds. None of them knew the ripple their moment would cause, and yet it did. And so the cabin of that airplane is more than a place of travel. It becomes a stage. It becomes a reminder. It becomes the proof that change does not only happen in parliaments or in protests or in speeches. Change begins in single moments. When someone is tested, when dignity is denied, when the world watches and waits to see what will happen next. What makes these moments so haunting, so unforgettable, is the truth that they do not belong only to the person experiencing them. They belong to everyone who sees them, everyone who hears them, everyone who carries the story forward. And the suspense lies in this: we never know when our own defining moment will arrive. We never know when the quiet, ordinary setting of our lives will suddenly become the stage for something larger than ourselves. And so the question lingers, hanging heavy in the air like the pause between heartbeats, when that moment comes. When the world looks at you, when assumptions weigh against you, when silence begs for your response, what will you do? At first glance, a ticket is nothing more than paper and ink. A barcode, a seat number, a destination printed neatly across its surface. Thousands of such tickets are issued every day, and to most, they are unremarkable. But sometimes, what seems ordinary carries within it an extraordinary weight. Sometimes, a ticket is not just about travel. It is about the journey that made that ticket possible. That piece of paper, in the hand of a black CEO stepping toward first class, was more than an assignment to a seat. It was a symbol of decades of struggle, of perseverance, of late nights and early mornings, of battles fought in silence. To the casual observer, it was a boarding pass. To him, it was a hard-earned reminder that the sacrifices of yesterday had built a future worthy of tomorrow. Think about what it takes to hold that ticket. It takes ambition in the face of doubt. It takes commitment in the face of failure. It takes resilience in the face of 1,000 voices saying, "You will not make it." That ticket was not printed in a moment. It was forged across years. It was born of childhood lessons, of parents who believed in him when the world didn't, of communities who prayed for his success because his success was theirs too. Yet, in the space of a single breath, that ticket was reduced to something else. Not a symbol of earned achievement, but a point of suspicion. How could a man like him, some thought, rightfully claim such a seat? The paper in his hand carried proof, yet the world around him demanded something more. And this is where the story becomes more than his story, because each of us carries tickets in life, symbols of what we've earned, reminders of what we've overcome. For one, it may be a diploma framed on the wall, the first in the family to graduate. For another, it may be the keys to a business they built from the ground up, after years of doubt and debt. For someone else, it may be a simple home bought through sacrifice, brick by brick, paycheck by paycheck. These tickets, whatever form they take, are never just objects. They are evidence. They are receipts of resilience. But the cruel reality is that society does not always see them for what they are. Too often, our tickets are questioned. Too often, The world looks past the sweat and sacrifice and instead judges by appearance, by stereotype, by bias too deeply ingrained to vanish overnight. The danger is not that these tickets are torn away. The danger is that their meaning is diminished. And when meaning is diminished, dignity is threatened. On that flight, the CEO's ticket was supposed to guarantee a seat, yet its value was not accepted until his identity was revealed. What should have been unquestionable proof became a test. And isn't that the very tension so many feel in life? That no matter how much is earned, no matter how valid the ticket, no matter how high one climbs, there will always be someone, somewhere demanding you prove again what you have already proven. But perhaps there is another way to see it. Perhaps the true power of that ticket is not that it grants access, but that it forces truth into the light. It reminds the world that progress cannot be measured only by who holds the ticket, but by whether the ticket itself is honored without question. This is why such moments carry suspense, because they hold within them the possibility of transformation. They reveal whether we as a society will honor the journeys people have taken, or whether we will continue to doubt and diminish those journeys based on assumptions that have nothing to do with merit. They place us at a crossroads where every choice, to honor or to question, to accept or to deny, becomes a reflection of who we are becoming. And when you think about it, this is not just about airlines or cabins or boarding passes. It is about life itself. Every achievement, every milestone, every step forward in dignity is a kind of ticket. And every ticket carries more than paper, more than ink. It carries the story of how far someone has come. It carries the story of generations who refused to give up. It carries the story of those who believed in a future even when the present was harsh. So when we see a ticket, the real question is not whether it entitles someone to a seat. The real question is whether we are prepared to honor the story behind it. And that question is never confined to airplanes. It follows us into schools, workplaces, neighborhoods, and nations. The ticket is always in someone's hand. The question is always in front of us. The suspense lives in whether or not we will recognize the weight it carries. There are few things in this world as powerful and as dangerous as an assumption. It does not require evidence. It does not need proof. It is born silently, invisibly, often without a word spoken. Yet, it carries the power to shape decisions, to alter perceptions, and to change the course of a single moment, or even an entire life. On that flight, when the black CEO stepped forward to claim his seat in first class, the air was charged not by what was said, but by what was assumed. The crew member who paused, the passengers who glanced up, the hesitation that swept across the aisle. All of it came from an assumption. Not that the ticket was invalid. Not that the system had made an error, but that the man holding it did not belong. This is the subtle, corrosive power of assumption. It thrives in silence. It does not announce itself. It does not argue. It does not raise its hand and declare its presence. Instead, it slips into the room unnoticed, shaping what people believe before they even realize they are believing it. And when assumptions take hold, truth becomes secondary and dignity becomes conditional. Think about the silence in that cabin. For a few seconds, no one spoke. No one challenged me. No one interrupted. The CEO stood with his ticket in hand, and in that pause, the weight of assumption filled the air heavier than any spoken accusation. Because assumptions rarely need words, their presence is felt in hesitation, in stares, in the unspoken suggestion that something is out of place. How many lives have been shaped, not by facts, but by assumptions? How many students have been underestimated because of where they came from, rather than what they are capable of? How many workers have been overlooked for opportunities because of how they look rather than how they perform? How many voices have been silenced before they ever spoke because someone assumed they had nothing worth saying? This is the danger. Assumptions do not just affect moments, they shape destinies. They create ceilings where none should exist. They build barriers where paths should be open. And perhaps the most unsettling part is that they are so often invisible. No one signs their name to an assumption. No one stands up and says, "Yes, I doubted you because of your skin, your gender, your accent, your background." Instead, assumptions remain unspoken, but their consequences echo loudly. And yet, the silence of a room filled with assumptions is not an empty silence. It is a revealing silence. It shows us what people truly believe when they think they do not have to say it out loud. On that plane, the silence revealed the doubt that still exists even in places of supposed progress. It revealed that success, no matter how great, can still be questioned when it wears the wrong face in the wrong setting. But here lies the tension, the suspense that grips us all, because assumptions are not only made in cabins and airports. They are made in offices, in classrooms, in hospitals, in neighborhoods. They are made every time someone looks at another human being and decides, without knowing their story, what they are capable of, where they belong, and what seat they deserve. And if assumptions can silence a room, they can also silence a society. They can rob people of confidence before they even try. They can discourage dreams before they are spoken. They can convince the world to doubt what has already been proven. And when that happens, the silence grows louder than any words could. But here's what makes this silence so haunting: it demands a response. When a room falls quiet under the weight of assumption, someone must decide whether to remain quiet with it, or whether to break that silence with truth. And breaking silence is never easy. It means confronting what others would rather leave unspoken. It means naming what others would rather keep hidden. It means risking discomfort in the name of dignity. The black CEO did not need to shout. He did not need to argue. Simply by standing tall with his ticket, he forced the silence to reveal itself. He became the living contradiction to every unspoken doubt. His very presence said what words could not. I belong here, and I do not need your permission to claim it. And so the silence of that cabin became more than awkward. It became instructive. It became a mirror, reflecting not just the assumptions of a few, but the deep, lingering assumptions of a society still learning to see clearly. And the question that lingers, the question that hangs heavy even now, is whether we will continue to let assumptions dictate who belongs, or whether we will finally learn to see one another not through silence, but through truth. Strength comes in many forms. Sometimes it is loud, forceful, impossible to ignore. We see it in the roar of protest, in the raised fist, in the voice that refuses to be silenced. But there is another form of strength, quieter, calmer, less obvious, yet just as powerful. It is the strength of standing tall without anger, the strength of holding your ground without raising your voice, the strength of letting dignity speak louder than outrage ever could. When the black CEO was denied his rightful seat in first class, there were 100 ways he could have responded. He could have shouted, demanded, turned the moment into a scene that forced attention, and perhaps no one would have blamed him. But instead, he chose something far more disarming. He chose composure. He chose stillness. He chose to stand tall with the full weight of his identity, his success, his humanity, pressing silently into the moment. This kind of response is not a weakness. It is not a submission. In fact, it requires more discipline than anger ever could. Anger is quick, reactive, fueled by the spark of emotion. But standing tall without anger requires control, patience, and faith in one's own worth. It is saying, I do not need to shout to prove I belong. I do not need to rage to justify my presence. My life, my work, my achievements already speak louder than any words you could use to doubt me. Think about the silence that followed. It was not a silence of defeat. It was a silence of revelation. Every passenger, every crew member, could see that the man they tried to deny carried himself with a dignity that no seat assignment could grant and no assumption could erase. His posture, his calmness, his refusal to be shaken turned the power of the moment upside down. The weight of judgment fell not on him, but on those who questioned him. This is the paradox of quiet strength. It unsettles more than shouting ever could. Because when a man stands tall without anger, he removes every excuse for the injustice aimed at him. He cannot be dismissed as irrational, cannot be written off as emotional, cannot be reduced to the stereotype that some are waiting to confirm. His calmness exposes the truth in a way anger never could. But let us be clear, this does not mean anger has no place. Anger has fueled movements, toppled barriers, forced change where silence once prevailed. Yet, in certain moments, when the world is watching closely, the quiet act of dignity can shake the foundations of prejudice even more. Because it leaves no place for denial. It forces those who are assumed to face their own reflection. Consider the great leaders of history. Martin Luther King Jr., who faced hate with unshakable calm. Nelson Mandela, who walked free after decades in prison not with bitterness, but with the strength of forgiveness. These men were not without anger. They knew its fire, but they also knew the strategic, transformative power of standing tall with composure, of refusing to let anger dictate their actions. They understood that true strength is not measured by volume, but by the ability to remain centered when the world tries to unbalance you. In that airplane cabin, the black CEO embodied this truth. He did not bend. He did not break. He did not allow anger to control him. Instead, he allowed dignity to define him. And in doing so, he shifted the weight of the moment. What began as an attempt to question his belonging ended as a revelation of his strength. But here lies the haunting question. Could you do the same? Could you stand in the face of judgment, in the face of doubt, in the face of voices telling you that you do not belong and respond not with fury, but with composure? Could you let your very presence, your life, your achievements, do the speaking for you? Could you trust that your dignity, carried with patience and calm, would speak louder than your anger ever could. This is where the suspense of such a moment lies, because none of us truly know until we are tested. None of us truly know how we will respond until the assumptions are aimed at us, until our worth is quietly questioned, until the silence of a room begs us to fill it with noise. Will we give in to the fire of anger, or will we find the discipline to let dignity speak instead? The answer remains unwritten, waiting for the moment life calls us to stand tall without anger. There is a deep wound in humanity that reveals itself in subtle yet piercing ways. When identity, something sacred and undeniable, is treated not as a truth but as a question. Who are you? Where do you belong? What gives you the right to stand here, sit here, exist here? These are not spoken aloud most of the time, but they linger in the eyes, in the hesitation, in the tone of a voice that suggests, without saying, prove yourself again. On that flight, the moment the black CEO handed over his first-class ticket, his identity was no longer seen as a fact. It was transformed, in an instant, into a question mark. Not because the ticket was invalid, not because the system had failed, but because his very presence disrupted the assumption of who first class was meant for. His accomplishments, his years of labor, his title, none of it was visible in that split second. What was visible was his skin, his face, his identity, and suddenly, that identity was not enough. This is what it means when identity becomes a question mark. It is the painful reality that no matter how much you have achieved, no matter how high you have climbed, you can still be reduced to doubt in a heartbeat. You can still be asked, silently or directly, to prove again what you have already proven 1,000 times. And the cruelty of it lies not just in the doubt itself, but in the exhaustion it creates, the endless cycle of validation demanded from those who should no longer have to validate their existence. Think of the weight of that question mark. It is not just about the man in the cabin. It is about every young student told they do not look like a scientist, every woman told she does not look like a leader, every immigrant told they do not look like they belong in positions of power. It is about generations of people who have been forced to carry proof of their worthiness in spaces where others walk unquestioned. When identity is treated as uncertain, it changes the air in the room. Confidence becomes hesitation. Belonging becomes fragile. Success feels temporary, as though it can be taken away by the doubt of a single stranger. And yet, for those who experience it, there is no choice but to continue forward, to stand taller, to move through the world with the constant awareness that they will be tested again and again. But here lies the paradox. The very thing meant to diminish often reveals strength instead. When identity is treated as a question, those who live under its shadow become resilient in ways others cannot imagine. They learn to stand in rooms that question them and still deliver excellence. They learn to claim seats that were not designed for them and still rise with dignity. They learn to exist in a world that doubts them and still carry themselves with certainty. And this resilience unsettles those who doubt. Because when a person stands firm in the face of suspicion, when they refuse to shrink, when they meet the question mark with an exclamation point of presence, the silence in the room grows heavier. It forces reflection. It forces people to realize that their assumptions cannot erase truth. But let us not pretend it is easy. To live with identity as a constant question is to live with a weight that never fully lifts. It is to prepare for scrutiny in moments that should have been simple. It is to understand that what others take for granted, the ability to move without doubt, is, for you, something earned every single day. And so the question deepens. What happens to a society when its people cannot walk into a room without their identity being silently questioned? What happens to progress when those who build it are asked to prove themselves at every step? What happens to dignity when it is treated not as a birthright, but as something conditional, granted only if others approve? The black CEO on that flight carried more than a ticket. He carried the weight of this question. His very existence in that seat became a challenge to the assumptions around him. And though he did not shout, though he did not argue, his presence was enough to confront the question mark head on. His silence said, "What words could not my identity is not up for debate." But the suspense remains because his story is not just his. It is the story of countless others who face the same silent interrogation every day. And the haunting truth is this: none of us know when we, too, might find our identity turned into a question mark, when the world will look at us and ask without asking whether we belong, and how we will choose to answer when that moment arrives. We often look to heroes in history books, to leaders whose names are etched in monuments, to figures whose lives seem larger than our own. But the truth is, the backbone of every society, every movement, every act of progress, is not made of the extraordinary few. It is made of ordinary people who choose to make extraordinary sacrifices. Behind every achievement that captures the world's attention, there is a story that rarely gets told. The story of someone who worked quietly, who endured silently, who gave up more than anyone will ever know. These are the people who may never stand on a stage, who may never hear their names cheered, yet whose sacrifices ripple through time, changing lives beyond their own. Think about the CEO on that flight. People may see the suit, the title, the ticket in his hand, but what they do not see is the journey that brought him there. They do not see the nights spent awake over spreadsheets and strategy. They do not see childhood marked by obstacles that others never had to face. They do not see the sacrifices of parents who worked double shifts, of teachers who refused to give up on him, of friends who reminded him he was capable when the world said otherwise. They do not see the moments of doubt, the failures that almost broke him, the resilience it took to stand back up. This is what sacrifice looks like. It is not glamorous. It is not always rewarded. It is often invisible. But it is the fuel behind every success story. And while the world sees only the final product, the title, the wealth, the recognition, those who made the journey know that every step forward was paid for with something precious. Sacrifice is the mother working 2 jobs so her children can sit in classrooms she never entered. Sacrifice is the student who says no to comfort, yes to struggle, because they believe in the power of education to change the trajectory of a family. Sacrifice is the worker who takes the night shift, the soldier who misses birthdays, the caregiver who sets aside dreams of their own to keep someone else alive. These sacrifices do not always come with applause. more often, they come with silence. They happen behind closed doors, in kitchens, in classrooms, in workplaces. They happen when no one is watching, when no cameras are rolling, when no headlines are being written. And yet, it is these sacrifices that make everything else possible. When the black CEO stood in that cabin, his presence was not just his own. He carried the weight of those sacrifices with him. He was the product of resilience that stretched back generations. Every step he had taken was built on the foundation of others who had given more than they had, believing that one day someone like him would take a seat others thought impossible. His first class ticket was not just a seat earned by him. It was a symbol of every sacrifice that paved the way. And here is where the suspense deepens. Because this truth is not unique to him. Each of us carries within us the sacrifices of others. None of us stand alone. None of us succeed alone. Our lives are built on the silent, unseen acts of those who came before us, those who chose to give something up so we might rise higher. And the question we rarely ask ourselves is this: what are we willing to sacrifice in return? What dreams are we willing to chase, even if it costs us comfort? What opportunities are we willing to create for others, even if it means giving up something of our own? What burden are we willing to carry so that someone else can walk more freely? Because progress is never free. It is purchased with time, with effort, with struggle, with sacrifice. And sometimes it is the smallest sacrifices that become the most extraordinary. A mother skipping meals so her child can eat. A father working late into the night so his family can see a brighter morning. A young person studying when everyone else is asleep, determined to build a future no one believes they can reach. These sacrifices may seem invisible in the moment, but they become the bricks that build legacies. The danger is that we forget them. We forget that the seats we claim were bought not just with our own effort, but with the unseen sacrifices of others. We forget that the privileges we enjoy were earned by someone else's pain, someone else's endurance, someone else's refusal to quit. And when we forget, we risk losing sight of the responsibility those sacrifices place on us. Because if ordinary people have always carried extraordinary burdens for the sake of the future, then the suspenseful question remains: when it is our turn, when the world asks us to choose between comfort and sacrifice, will we rise to the challenge? Or will we turn away from the weight that once carried us forward? There are moments in life when the world stops being just a backdrop and suddenly turns into a mirror, reflecting not only who we are, but what we truly believe. That flight, that single journey through the clouds, was not just a routine trip from one city to another. It became a stage where humanity revealed itself in glances, in whispers, in the quiet tension of disbelief. When the black CEO was denied his rightful first-class seat, it was not merely a question of travel arrangements. It was a question of dignity, a question of worth, a question of identity. The cabin transformed into something more than a vessel in the sky. It became a reflection of every bias, every assumption, every unspoken judgment carried silently in the hearts of those on board. People saw more than a man in a suit. They saw a story they thought they already knew. Some looked with suspicion, some with discomfort, some with quiet admiration. Each passenger became a character in a silent play their thoughts echoing what society has whispered for decades. And in that moment, the flight itself became a mirror, not of clouds, not of cities below, but of humanity above. It is easy to think of bias as something distant, something abstract, something that exists only in news stories or history books. But in reality, it happens in rooms like that plane cabin. It happens in offices, in classrooms, in neighborhoods. It happens in the places where we least expect it, hidden beneath smiles, concealed behind policies, cloaked in casual comments. And when it does not simply reveal the character of one person or one airline employee. It reveals the collective state of a society that still struggles to reconcile its ideals with its actions. For the CEO, this moment was more than an inconvenience. It was a reminder that no matter how high he had climbed, no matter what title he carried, no matter what battles he had won, the world still carried a mirror that reflected back assumptions he could not control. That reflection was not his truth, but it was the truth of others. The lens through which they viewed him, the filter that distorted his worth before he even spoke a word. And this is where the power of the mirror becomes undeniable. Because mirrors do not lie. They show us exactly what is there, even if we would rather not see it. That flight showed passengers more than a man being denied a seat. It showed them themselves. It showed them their hesitations, their silence, their willingness to watch rather than intervene. It showed them whether they would stand for fairness or shrink into the comfort of inaction. The uncomfortable truth is that every environment becomes a mirror at some point. A workplace meeting reflects leadership. A classroom reflects values. A community reflects its priorities. And a flight suspended in the sky reflected both prejudice and possibility. For in the same cabin where judgment was cast, there were also eyes that began to shift. People who began to question their own assumptions. People who saw dignity where others saw doubt. People who realized they were watching more than an incident. They were witnessing a lesson unfolding before them. This is why such moments stay with us, because they force us to ask, what would we see if the mirror were held up to us? Would we find courage or hesitation? Compassion or indifference? Would we see a reflection we are proud of or one we avoid confronting? Mirrors do not only expose, they challenge. They remind us that the face we present to the world is not always the same as the values we claim to hold. And when a mirror appears unexpectedly, on a flight, in a meeting, in a simple encounter on the street, it leaves us with only one question when confronted with the truth of who we are. Will we accept it and change, or will we turn away and pretend the reflection is not ours to claim? Life often presents us with moments of decision that seem simple at first glance, but carry the weight of consequences far beyond our immediate perception. One such moment can appear in the unlikeliest of places: a flight, a meeting, a conversation in a hallway, and yet it holds within it the power to shape the trajectory of a person, a community, or even a society. At that critical intersection, the question is never just about what we see. It is about what we choose to do. Will we build barriers, or will we build bridges? When the Black CEO stepped forward to claim his rightful seat, those around him were confronted with a choice. Some could have doubled down on assumptions, on doubt, on the invisible walls society had constructed for centuries. They could have treated the moment as a barrier, as a way to reinforce division, separation, and hierarchy. And many, instinctively, may have felt the pull of that path because barriers are familiar, they are easy. They protect the comfort of those already in place. They preserve the status quo without requiring courage. But there is another path, a path less traveled, a path that demands awareness, courage, and empathy. It is the path of the bridge, the willingness to see beyond assumption, to recognize potential, to open a space where everyone has the right to claim their seat, their voice, their opportunity. Bridges are not built by ignoring discomfort. They are built by facing it head-on. Bridges require us to confront our own biases, to question our own judgments, and to take responsibility for creating connection rather than division. Consider how small gestures can become bridges. A nod of acknowledgement, a moment of patience, a decision to step aside and let justice take precedence over assumption. These acts seem simple, almost imperceptible. But in that simplicity lies their extraordinary power. Bridges are rarely forged in grand speeches or monumental events. They are forged in the quiet. Decisive choices we make when no one is watching, when the stakes are subtle yet profound. In that airplane cabin, the barrier was clear. It was a silent wall of doubt, reinforced by assumption, by history, by unconscious fear. But the bridge emerged through presence, through calm dignity, through the insistence that merit and humanity could not be denied. The CEO did not demand a bridge with words or confrontation. He created it simply by being who he was, someone whose life and achievements were undeniable. His presence invited others to step across the divide and see him fully, without judgment, without preconception. This is the choice each of us faces every day. In workplaces, do we elevate those who deserve recognition, or do we allow barriers to keep opportunities limited? In schools, do we encourage curiosity and ambition, or do we silently reinforce the boundaries of expectation? In communities, do we build connections, open doors, foster understanding, or do we erect walls, perpetuate division, and retreat into safety? Every action, every decision, every glance carries the potential to be a barrier or a bridge. And the suspense, the tension that keeps us awake at night, lies in the uncertainty of choice. We never know exactly what impact a single moment will have, whether our choice to build or destroy will ripple forward, shaping lives we will never meet. We do not see the unseen bridges that could change a person's destiny or the barriers that could stifle potential for years to come. Every moment presents us with this invisible power, and every choice carries consequences we cannot yet measure. Bridges require courage because they demand patience, empathy, and humility. They require us to consider the perspectives of others, to recognize the humanity that exists in each person's journey, and to step outside our own assumptions and comfort zones. And they are never permanent until they are maintained. A neglected bridge can crumble. A barrier challenged can be torn down. The choice is ongoing, dynamic, relentless, and intimately personal. The story of that flight teaches us that bridges are possible even in the most confined spaces. Even when doubt feels dominant, even when assumptions seem unshakable, even when history seems fixed, The act of recognizing someone's worth, of honoring their achievements, of opening space for them to occupy what is rightfully theirs, is a bridge that stretches far beyond its immediate context. And yet, as the plane continued its journey, as passengers watched and reflected, the question remained suspended in the air: which will we choose in our own lives when the next moment comes? Barriers that divide, or bridges that connect, and whose future will hang in the balance. There is a currency that governs human interaction more than any banknote, more than any title, more than any achievement. It is invisible, intangible, yet it determines the course of relationships, careers, communities, and even entire societies. That currency is respect. And it is earned not through privilege, not through wealth, not through assumption. It is earned through recognition of another person's humanity, their effort, their dignity. On that flight, when the black CEO was denied his first-class seat, the lack of respect was immediate and tangible, even though no one counted it in numbers or coins. It was felt in the pause, in the doubt, in the hesitation of the crew. It was measured in the subtle questioning of his right to be there. And in that moment, respect, or the absence of it, became more valuable than any seat, more significant than any ticket, more revealing than any spoken word. Respect is a currency that can be spent or withheld. It is exchanged in gestures, in tone, in acknowledgement. When it is absent, it creates a debt, a deficit that ripples far beyond the immediate interaction. The person denied respect feels its weight. The observer senses it, the community absorbs it. And yet, when respect is granted, it has the power to elevate, to validate, to inspire. It is a currency that can transform a tense moment into an opportunity for connection, a barrier into a bridge. Consider the paradox: the black CEO's achievements, his title, his ticket, all represented measurable success. Yet the world around him initially failed to respect that success because of assumptions rooted in bias. No amount of accomplishment could instantly earn the recognition he deserved, not until dignity and presence forced it to be acknowledged. This is the invisible power of respect. It must be granted, often before it is recognized, and it can never be assumed. Respect is not a passive acknowledgement. It is an active decision. It is the choice to see beyond assumptions, to honor effort, to recognize worth, even when it challenges our preconceived notions. And it is often the hardest to practice when it is most needed. When tension is high, when fear or doubt clouds judgment, when history whispers caution or prejudice. That is when respect becomes revolutionary. That is when it becomes transformative. Every human being carries the need for respect, whether they wear a suit, a uniform, or the simple clothing of everyday life. Every achievement, no matter how small, deserves acknowledgement. Every effort, no matter how silent, deserves recognition. And when respect is denied, the consequence is not just personal, it is societal. A society that fails to honor respect risks breeding resentment, mistrust, and division. A society that invests in respect fosters cooperation, courage, and shared progress. The flight became a microcosm of this principle. The CEO's calm insistence, his quiet dignity, demanded respect not through confrontation, but through the undeniable weight of his life's work. It was a reminder that respect cannot be dictated by assumptions, cannot be commanded by title alone, cannot be borrowed from privilege. It must be recognized for what it is, the acknowledgement of a human being standing fully in their truth. And here is where the suspense lies, because respect is never guaranteed. It can be given or withheld in an instant, in a glance, in a sentence. It can be undermined by fear, jealousy, or indifference. It can shape the outcome of a moment, deciding whether someone rises, falters, or is pushed aside. And we are all participants in this currency. We can invest it, we can squander it, we can demand it, or we can deny it. Every choice carries weight. Every interaction leaves an imprint. But the most unsettling part of respect is that it is invisible, yet indispensable. You cannot see it in a ledger. You cannot hold it in your hand, yet it has the power to shape destinies, to shift perspectives, to transform conflict into understanding. The true cost of disrespect is far greater than any financial or social loss, and the true reward of respect far richer than any material gain. So when the black CEO stood in the aisle, when the assumptions of others sought to devalue him, what he demanded, not with words, but with presence, was the ultimate currency: respect. And in that moment, the plane became a classroom, teaching everyone present that respect is the invisible force that can topple doubt, elevate the overlooked, and create the conditions for true human connection. And the question that lingers heavy in the cabin and in the world beyond is this: when the next moment comes, the next opportunity to grant or withhold respect, will we recognize its value, or will we let its absence shape the lives of those who deserve it most at first glance? A seat is merely a place to sit. It has 4 legs, a cushion, a space assigned by a ticket or reservation. It is designed to support the body, to hold it while the world passes by, whether in an airplane, an auditorium, or a courtroom. But sometimes, a seat becomes more than just a place to rest. Sometimes, a seat becomes a symbol of access, of privilege, of recognition, and, paradoxically, of exclusion. On that flight, the black CEO approached his first-class seat with confidence earned over decades. To anyone uninformed, it was just a number printed on paper. To him, it represented acknowledgement of his journey, of the milestones he had reached, of every barrier he had overcome to arrive in a place where the view was expansive and the service attentive. And yet, the moment he extended his hand to claim it, the seat became something else entirely. It became a test. It became a question. It became a mirror of society's assumptions and biases. The seat defined nothing about his worth. It did not make him successful. It did not validate his intelligence. It did not measure his contributions. And yet, in the eyes of others, that seat appeared to define everything. It became a battleground where perception collided with reality. People looked at the man, saw a face they did not expect in that space, and assumed, for a fleeting moment, that he did not belong. In that instant, the seat carried the weight of centuries' unspoken expectations and limitations imposed on those who dared to claim spaces they had been historically denied. This is the paradox of symbols. They are at once arbitrary and monumental. The seat itself is nothing, just a piece of furniture assigned by a ticketing system. Yet it becomes monumental because humans assign meaning to it. It becomes a measure of who is included, who is respected, who is allowed to occupy positions of comfort or influence. And when those meanings clash with reality, the resulting tension is almost unbearable. Consider the countless moments in everyday life when something as simple as a seat, a desk, a line in a register, a position on a team becomes a reflection of assumptions. The child told them they cannot sit at the front of the classroom. The employee was overlooked for a promotion. The community is excluded from decisions that affect their lives. The space itself carries no inherent power, yet the world around it interprets meaning, often unfairly, and that meaning shapes experience. In that cabin, the CEO did not react with anger or confrontation. He did not argue over the legitimacy of the ticket. He allowed the seat to remain a silent witness to the truth he carried, that no amount of assumption could define him, that no chair, no barrier, no moment of doubt could diminish the worth he had earned. And yet the seat became a stage, a spotlight, a proving ground for the values of everyone present. The suspense of such a moment lies in its duality. The seat is both trivial and critical. It is both nothing and everything. It tests character, patience, perception, and the courage to recognize what truly matters. For the man who claims it, it is a place to sit, yes, but also a place to stand metaphorically, a place to assert dignity, to claim respect, to illuminate the absurdity of assumptions that would attempt to measure worth by location rather than by life lived. And the question that hovers, she invisible yet heavy, is not about the seat itself, but about the observers. What does it reveal about their values, their judgments, their willingness to see beyond the arbitrary? Does it show a society ready to recognize merit, wherever it sits, or one still clinging to outdated definitions of who belongs where? Every glance toward the seat, every hesitation in acknowledgement, becomes a reflection of collective consciousness, a silent debate of progress versus prejudice. The seat, in essence, becomes a lesson in perspective. It teaches us that the most ordinary objects can become symbols of extraordinary meaning. It reminds us that inclusion and exclusion are often measured in the smallest, simplest ways. It demonstrates that the human mind assigns power to objects not for what they are, but for what they represent, and that understanding this is essential to navigating a world rife with bias and assumption. And as the CEO settled into the seat, calm, composed, the cabin held its collective breath, because the seat, while physically unchanging, had transformed. It had become a question, a challenge, a reflection. It defined nothing about the man, and yet, in that moment, it defined everything about the world watching him, about the assumptions it held, and about the choices that would be made in response to this singular, ordinary, yet extraordinary object. Every life-changing moment begins with a decision. Often, it is a decision so small, so seemingly insignificant, that we scarcely notice its weight at first. Yet, the truth is that one choice, one refusal to act, one step forward, one acknowledgement of truth, can ripple outward, touching lives, shaping perspectives, and altering the course of history in ways that no one can fully measure. On that flight, the black CEO was confronted with a decision that was no less consequential than those that had defined his life before. He could react with anger, with confrontation, with frustration. He could escalate the moment, allowing the emotions of the situation to dictate the outcome. Or he could stand firm in his dignity, embodying the very qualities that had carried him to success and forced the moment to reflect the truth rather than assumption. And in that choice, the first ripple began. We often underestimate the power of a single decision. We imagine that change requires vast action, loud declarations, and monumental efforts. But sometimes, it is the quiet act, the measured response, the refusal to conform to unfair expectations, the calm assertion of one's right, that sets waves in motion. The decision to respond with composure, to act with integrity, to honor oneself in the face of doubt, sends a signal far beyond the immediate moment. Consider the lives affected by this single act. The crew who hesitated, the passengers who assumed, the observers who may have silently judged, all were confronted with the ripple. They were forced to reconsider what they had assumed about authority, merit, and identity. They were presented with the opportunity to reflect on their own biases, their own reactions, their own understanding of fairness. And in this ripple, the personal became collective. The decision of one man echoed far beyond his own journey. Ripple effects are often invisible at first. You may never know whose life is changed by your choice, whose perception is shifted, whose courage is awakened by watching you stand firm. A student sees your example and learns to persevere. A colleague witnesses your composure and feels empowered to assert themselves. A stranger sees dignity meet doubt and begins to question their own assumptions. The ripple spreads quietly, almost imperceptibly, yet its influence is profound. The paradox of a ripple is that it begins with a single point of impact, but cannot be confined. It radiates outward, crossing boundaries we never imagined it would reach. One decision made with clarity and courage has the potential to alter not just a moment, but the trajectory of individuals, communities, and even societal norms. And the most fascinating part is that the person initiating the ripple rarely knows its full effect. They only know the choice they made, and the courage it required. On that airplane, the ripple was subtle yet undeniable. The moment the CEO claimed his seat with calm dignity, the environment shifted. The assumptions of others were unsettled. The tension in the cabin became awareness. Eyes that once glanced with doubt lingered with reflection. And for a moment, the ripple extended beyond the individual, touching every observer with a lesson that had been waiting for decades to be recognized, that actions, even small ones, speak louder than assumptions, louder than prejudice, louder than fear. Yet, ripples carry suspense because their effects are uncertain. You never know how far they will travel, whom they will touch, or what they will change. The one decision you make today, to act with courage, to respond with integrity, to assert your worth, may alter a life in ways you cannot foresee. It may challenge beliefs long held, open doors previously closed, or inspire others to stand when they would otherwise remain seated. The uncertainty of the ripple creates tension, suspense, and the haunting question of responsibility. Will you choose wisely when the moment arrives? And perhaps the most profound lesson of a ripple is that it demands awareness. Every choice, no matter how small, carries consequences beyond what the eye can see. Every decision to act or to remain passive initiates movement, shapes perception, and writes a story that will continue long after the moment has passed. The CEO's decision was a single point of origin, A quiet act with extraordinary implications, sending waves through a cabin and beyond, leaving everyone present to ask themselves what they would have done if faced with the same choice. Life has a way of compressing the extraordinary into a single moment. A moment that appears, at first, ordinary. A flight boarding, a conversation, a handshake, and yet, beneath the surface, it carries the potential to alter everything we thought we knew about ourselves, about others, and about the world. It is in these moments that destiny often hides, waiting for the courage, the awareness, and the presence of mind to recognize its significance. On that flight, the moment the Black CEO approached his first-class seat was one of those rare intersections where simplicity and profundity collided. To most, it might have been just an administrative detail, a small inconvenience, an ordinary act of travel. But to those present, and to him, it was much more. It was a test of values, a reflection of assumptions, a challenge to recognize dignity where doubt had taken root. In that instant, the ordinary became extraordinary. The mundane became a crucible in which character was revealed. This is the essence of transformative moments. They arrive without fanfare. They are not heralded with announcements or warning signs. They are quiet, often subtle, yet their impact can resonate for years, influencing behavior, shaping thought, and leaving an indelible mark on all who witness them, and their power lies in the choices made within them. The courage to act with integrity, the patience to respond with composure, the clarity to see beyond what is immediately visible. The CEO's calm, unwavering presence in that aisle was the fulcrum of this moment. He could have reacted with anger or confrontation, allowing the energy of injustice to define the encounter. Instead, he chose dignity and patience, asserting his rightful place not through loud proclamation but through the quiet power of truth. This choice shifted the dynamics in ways that were visible and invisible alike. It challenged assumptions, unsettled comfort zones, and created an opportunity for reflection that extended far beyond the cabin. Moments that change everything often reveal something about everyone involved. In that small, confined space, each passenger and crew member was forced to confront their own assumptions, their own judgments, and their own capacity for fairness and recognition. The ripple effect of a single act, standing tall without anger, insisting on respect, claiming space with dignity, transformed a simple flight into a mirror of society, showing both its flaws and its potential for growth. And this is the suspense of such moments. Their outcomes are never fully predictable. One person's courage can ignite another's awareness. One act of dignity can challenge entrenched beliefs. One choice to respond with integrity can ripple outward in ways no one could foresee. Yet, just as easily, it can pass unnoticed, the opportunity unrecognized, the lesson unrealized. The tension lies in the uncertainty. What will this moment inspire? Who will act? Who will remain silent? Who will be transformed? History is filled with moments like this, where ordinary acts became extraordinary in their consequences. A refusal to yield, a decision to stand firm, a calm insistence on truth. These are the moments that shift paradigms, reshape expectations, and create new possibilities. And often, the observer is left in suspense, unsure whether they will be part of the change, whether they will rise to the occasion. whether they will allow the lesson to penetrate their own assumptions. The CEO's journey, crystallized in this single moment, is a testament to the latent power within all human interactions. It reminds us that the potential for transformation is rarely found in grand gestures alone. It resides in quiet insistence, in moral clarity, in the courage to claim what is rightfully yours while honoring the humanity of those around you. Every act of integrity, every refusal to bow to doubt, has the power to redefine the space it occupies. And yet, the moment carries an unsettling truth. No one can predict its full consequences. The ripples spread silently, invisibly, through decisions yet to be made, through minds yet to be opened, through systems yet to adapt. What starts in one aisle of one plane can influence choices in boardrooms, classrooms, and homes far beyond. It is the tension of suspense that gives the moment its gravity. The knowledge that a single act, a single decision, a single recognition of worth may change everything, if those who witness it allow themselves to be transformed by it. And so the question lingers, hovering in the air like the plane itself, suspended between past and future, observation and action, silence and acknowledgement. Will the lessons of this moment take root, or will they drift unnoticed into the routine of ordinary life, age, leaving only the faintest echo of a possibility that could have changed everything? Life does not wait for permission, and neither do the moments that define it. From the quiet strength of standing tall without anger, to the challenge of having one's identity questioned, to the ordinary people making extraordinary sacrifices, every experience, every interaction, every decision sends ripples we cannot fully predict. The flight, the seat, the simple acts of dignity and courage, they were not just incidents. They were mirrors, bridges, and invisible currencies shaping the world around us. What we witnessed in that cabin, what we have traced through these keynotes, is more than a story of a black CEO claiming a seat. It is a reflection of every person who has faced doubt, bias, or hesitation and still chosen to rise. It is the reminder that respect, integrity, and courage are forces more powerful than assumptions, more transformative than conflict, more lasting than any title or privilege. And yet, the suspense lingers because the power of these lessons does not end with observation. They demand action. They ask us to recognize the invisible bridges we can build, the choices we must make, the moments in which we refuse to let silence or fear define us. They challenge us to honor the sacrifices of those who came before, and to create opportunities for those who follow. Every life holds such a moment, a point where everything could change with a single decision. It may be a moment of confrontation, a moment of patience, a moment of courage. It may appear ordinary, unnoticed, fleeting. And yet, within it lies the extraordinary potential to shape perspectives, ignite awareness, and redefine the possibilities of what we can achieve together. So, as the echoes of that flight ripple through the corridors of time and memory, one question remains, suspended in the air like the clouds outside the window. When your moment comes, when the world tests your dignity, your patience, your courage, will you rise to meet it? And will you let it change not just your life, but the lives of everyone who witnesses it?